at the glass tower. The Palisade Hotel's grand ballroom glittered like a treasure chest flung open. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos as San Francisco's tech elite mingled beneath them. Olivia. Winters sipped her champagne slowly, savoring the slight burn at the back of her throat. At 36, she had finally learned to appreciate the subtle pleasures in life. Good champagne, comfortable silence, and the satisfaction of standing on her own 2 feet. "You're doing that thing again?" Julian whispered, his breath warm, against her ear. "That thing where you look like you're plotting world domination?" Olivia smiled, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. "Maybe I am." Julian Reynolds, CEO of Nexus Innovations and tonight's guest of honor, slipped his hand around her waist. Their relationship had been a closely guarded secret for the past 8 months. Office romances were complicated enough without adding her position as Nexus's chief legal officer into the mix. The board would have opinions. The press would have a field day. But tonight, Julian had promised, would change everything. "There's someone staring at you," Julian murmured. 3 o'clock, by the ice sculpture. Olivia turned, her smile freezing, in place. Camille Thornton stood beside the towering ice replica of the Nexus logo, her champagne flute halfway to her lips, eyes fixed on Olivia. Beside her, looking distinctly uncomfortable in his tuxedo, was Daniel Winters, Olivia's ex-husband of 3 years and Camille's fiancé. "Wonderful," Olivia muttered. "Just the audience I wanted tonight." "Ex-husband?" Julian asked, his grip on her waist tightening slightly. "And his replacement for me." Olivia took another sip of champagne. "I didn't know Thornton Media was on the guest list." "They made a significant donation to the foundation," Julian explained. "Politics." Olivia nodded, understanding immediately. Daniel's father owned Thornton Media, one of the largest publishing companies on the West Coast. Connections were currency in their world, and Julian was too smart to snub potential allies. "Should we say hello?" Julian asked, already knowing the answer. "Absolutely not." Olivia turned her back to them. "The divorce was amicable enough, but that doesn't mean I need to make small talk with the woman he left me for." The lights dimmed slightly, and the orchestra transitioned to a softer melody. The crowd's chatter quieted as the event coordinator tapped the microphone at the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual Nexus Innovations Charity Gala. We're honored to have you all here tonight as we celebrate another year of technological advancement and philanthropic achievement." Julian squeezed Olivia's hand. "That's my cue. Don't go anywhere." She watched him weave through the crowd toward the stage, tall and confident in his midnight blue tuxedo. When they had first met, she dismissed him as another tech wunderkind with more money than sense. How wrong she had been. The coordinator continued. "It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our host for the evening, the visionary behind Nexus Innovations, Mr. Julian Reynolds." Applause rippled through the room as Julian took the stage. His presence commanded attention, his smile genuine as he greeted the crowd. "Thank you all for coming tonight. Your generosity will help fund STEM education programs in underserved communities across the country." He paused, scanning the room. "Before we continue with tonight's program, I hope you'll indulge me for a moment. There's someone special here tonight who has changed my life in ways I never imagined possible." Olivia's heart stuttered. This wasn't part of the plan. They had agreed to wait until after the gala to announce their relationship, perhaps with a carefully worded press release next week. "Olivia Winters," Julian called, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "Would you please join me on stage?" A spotlight found her, and hundreds of eyes turned in her direction. Across the room, she caught Camille's startled expression, the younger woman's lips parting in surprise. Daniel stood beside her, his face unreadable. With practiced composure, Olivia made her way to the stage, her emerald gown catching the light with each step. Julian extended his hand, helping her up the short stairs. "Many of you know Olivia as our brilliant chief legal officer." Julian addressed the crowd, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart that only Olivia could feel through their joined hands. "What you don't know is that for the past 8 months, she has also been the person who reminds me why all this matters." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Olivia, you walked into my life as a colleague and became my closest confidant, my greatest challenger, and my best friend. You've seen me at my worst and somehow still found something worth loving." From the corner of her eye, Olivia could see Camille's face, a mixture of shock and something else, something that looked remarkably like envy. Daniel stood frozen beside her, his glass halfway to his lips. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The collective gasp from the audience was audible as he dropped to one knee. "I had a whole speech prepared," he admitted with a sheepish smile. "But looking at you now, all I want to say is this. Olivia Winters, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" The room held its breath. Olivia's world narrowed. To Julian's hopeful eyes and the stunning emerald-cut diamond nestled in the box, the same deep green as her dress, as if he had planned this meticulous coordination all along. "Yes," she whispered, then louder for the benefit of the room, "Yes, I will." The ballroom erupted in applause as Julian slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her. As they broke apart, Olivia's gaze drifted automatically to where Camille and Daniel stood. Daniel was clapping politely, but Camille's expression was one of pure, undisguised shock, her world visibly tilting on its axis as she watched the woman she had replaced receive everything she had ever wanted. And in that moment, as Julian's arm wrapped securely around her waist, Olivia realized that sometimes the best revenge wasn't planned at all. It was simply living well. Aftershocks. The Uber ride home from the Palisade Hotel stretched into an unbearable silence. Camille Thornton stared out the window at San Francisco's glittering skyline, her reflection in the glass showing mascara slightly smudged beneath her right eye. She hadn't cried. Not exactly. But her hand had trembled so violently after Olivia's engagement that she jabbed herself with her mascara wand in the hotel bathroom. Beside her, Daniel Winters loosened his bow tie with one finger, his other hand resting on the leather seat between them. He hadn't attempted to hold her hand since they'd left the gala. "So," he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "That was unexpected." Camille nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The image of Julian Reynolds on one knee before Olivia kept replaying in her mind. The hushed anticipation of the crowd, the perfect emerald ring catching the light, the way Olivia had stood there looking not surprised, but radiant, confident, like a woman who knew her worth. "I didn't know they were dating," Daniel continued, filling the silence. "She never mentioned it during our last property settlement meeting." "Why would she?" Camille finally turned to face him. "It's not like you two swapped dating stories over coffee." Daniel flinched at her tone. "I just meant—" "I know what you meant." She sighed, instantly regretting her sharpness. "Sorry, I'm just... It caught me off guard." The Uber pulled up to their Marina District apartment building. Daniel paid while Camille stepped out onto the sidewalk, the cool night air a relief against her flushed skin. They rode the elevator to the 12th floor in continued silence, the only sound the soft ping as they passed each floor. Inside their apartment, modern, minimalist, and still feeling temporarily furnished after a year of living there, Camille kicked off her heels and headed straight to the kitchen. She poured herself a generous glass of Cabernet, not offering one to Daniel, who had disappeared into the bedroom to change. She carried her wine to the living room's floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the partial view of the Golden Gate Bridge. 3 years ago, she had been a junior editor at Thornton. Media ambitious but anonymous. Then she'd been assigned to work with Daniel on his debut novel, a literary fiction piece that had garnered respectable reviews but modest sales. She'd been drawn to his quiet thoughtfulness, so different from the aggressive tech bros that populated San Francisco's dating scene. When he'd mentioned he was separated from his wife, she'd told herself to keep things professional. But late night's editing had turned to drinks, drinks to dinner, dinner to more. By the time his divorce was finalized, they were already living together. And 6 months ago, he'd proposed with a princess-cut diamond that had belonged to his grandmother. It had seemed like a fairy tale, until tonight, when she'd watched another fairy tale unfold, one that made hers seem suddenly small. "You're still in your dress?" Daniel observed, returning to the living room in sweatpants and a faded Stanford t-shirt. His dark hair was rumpled, as if he'd run his hands through it multiple times. "I'm thinking," Camille replied, taking another sip of wine. "About the gala?" "About Olivia." She turned to face him. "Your ex-wife just got engaged to one of the most eligible bachelors in the tech world, a CEO worth, what, a couple billion? And you don't seem surprised." Daniel sank onto their gray sectional sofa. "I'm surprised," he said carefully. "But Olivia has always been ambitious." "Ambitious," Camille repeated, tasting the word. "Is that why you left her? Because she was ambitious?" A flash of something, guilt, regret, crossed Daniel's features. "We've talked about this. We wanted different things. She was focused on her career. I wanted a traditional wife." Camille set her wine glass down with more force than necessary. "Someone who would edit your books and plan dinner parties for your father's media friends? Someone who wouldn't outshine you?" "That's not fair," Daniel protested, leaning forward. "I never asked you to give up your career. You're still working at the publishing house. As an editor who hasn't been promoted since we started dating, despite bringing in 3 bestsellers last year." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, grievances she hadn't even admitted to herself until this moment. Daniel looked genuinely shocked. "I didn't know you were unhappy with your job. You never said anything." "Because I didn't want to be like her." Camille gestured vaguely toward the window, as if Olivia were out there somewhere in the city. "I didn't want to be the woman who chose career over relationship. I wanted to prove I could do both." "And now?" Daniel asked quietly. Camille looked down at her engagement ring, the diamond catching the dim light of their apartment. It was beautiful, vintage, meaningful, and suddenly felt like a consolation prize. "Now I'm wondering if I've been playing the wrong game all along." She walked back to the windows, staring at her own reflection superimposed over the nighttime cityscape. "Do you know what I felt when I saw Julian propose to Olivia? Not jealousy. Not about him anyway. It was—" she searched for the word. "Recognition. Like I was seeing a version of myself that could have existed if I'd made different choices." Daniel was silent for a long moment. "Are you saying you regret us?" The question hung in the air, between them. Camille turned slowly, studying the man she had agreed to marry. Daniel was handsome in a bookish way, kind, stable, everything she had thought she wanted. "I'm saying I don't know who I am anymore." She twisted the ring on her finger. "When was the last time you asked me about my ambitions, Daniel? Not what I want for dinner, or what color we should paint the guest room, but what I want from my life. My career, my future." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. His silence was answer enough. "That's what I saw tonight," Camille continued, her voice growing steadier. "I saw a woman whose partner was proud of her success, not threatened by it. Did you see how Julian looked at Olivia like she was his equal, his partner? And I don't look at you that way?" There was hurt in Daniel's voice now. "You look at me like I'm a supporting character in your story," Camille said softly. "But tonight I realized I want to be the protagonist in my own. She slipped the ring off her finger and placed it gently on the coffee table between them. The sound it made, a soft, almost imperceptible clink against the glass, seemed to echo in the silent apartment. "Camille," Daniel began, rising from the sofa. "Let's not be hasty. You're upset about the gala, about seeing Olivia." "This isn't about Olivia," Camille interrupted. "It's about me. About the fact that I've spent 3 years trying to be the anti-Olivia, and all it's done is make me lose sight of who I actually am." "So that's it? You're leaving?" Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "Where will you go?" Camille hadn't thought that far ahead, but as the question hung in the air, a sense of clarity washed over her. "Jenna has a spare room in her place in Oakland. I'll stay there until I figure things out." "And us?" Daniel gestured between them, his expression raw. "I don't know," Camille admitted. "I need time to think. To remember who I was before I became your girlfriend, before I started measuring myself against your ex-wife." She moved toward the bedroom to pack an overnight bag, but paused in the hallway. "You know what's ironic? I spent so much time worrying about being compared to Olivia, but in the end I was the one doing all the comparing." As she turned away, Camille caught her reflection in the hallway mirror, smudged mascara, flushed cheeks, and underneath it all, the faint glimmer of something she hadn't seen in years. Possibility. Behind her, Daniel sat back down on the sofa, staring at the diamond ring on the table, a family heirloom that had now been rejected by 2 different women. In the quiet apartment, the sound of Camille opening and closing drawers felt like a countdown to an ending neither of them had seen coming, all because of a proposal neither of them had been part of. Past reflections. The autumn rain tapped gently against the windows of Olivia's Telegraph Hill apartment, creating a soothing rhythm that matched the classical music playing softly in the background. She sat cross-legged on her couch, a glass of red wine in one hand, her tablet in the other, scrolling through the press coverage of her engagement. The story had broken wide 3 days ago, and the business and society pages couldn't get enough of it. The brilliant attorney and the tech visionary, a power couple for the digital age. The emerald ring caught the light as she swiped through another article, and Olivia paused to admire it. Not because of its considerable size or value, though both were impressive, but because Julian had chosen something so perfectly aligned with her taste. Her previous engagement ring from Daniel had been a traditional diamond solitaire, beautiful but conventional, just like their marriage had been. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Board meeting running late. Dinner at 8 instead of 7. She typed back quickly. "No problem. I have plenty to keep me occupied." Including a walk down memory lane, she thought, setting aside her tablet and picking up the old leather photo album she'd pulled from her bookshelf earlier. She hadn't looked at these pictures in years, had nearly thrown them away during her post-divorce purge. But something had stopped her, perhaps some instinct that she might need these reminders someday. Olivia opened the album, and there they were, she and Daniel on their wedding day 7 years ago. She in a simple white sheath dress, he in a charcoal suit. Both smiling, both hopeful, both utterly unaware of how spectacularly they would fail each other. "We were so young," she murmured to herself, tracing the outline of her younger face in the photo. 29, already a rising star at her law firm, specializing in intellectual property law for tech companies. Daniel had been 31, working on his first novel while teaching creative writing part-time at Berkeley. They'd met at a literary festival where she'd been part of a panel on publishing rights. He'd approached her afterward, shy but determined, asking questions that revealed a genuine interest in the legal aspects of creative work. Their first date had been coffee, which turned into dinner, which turned into a moonlit walk along the Embarcadero. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, married, Olivia turned the page. A photo of them in front of their first apartment, a cramped one-bedroom in the Mission District that she'd thought charming until winter revealed its inadequate heating and paper-thin walls. Next, a snapshot from a weekend trip to Napa, Daniel's. Arm around her shoulders, wine glasses in their free hands, her head tilted back in laughter at something now forgotten. They had been happy then, genuinely happy. The problems had crept in so gradually that she hadn't noticed until they'd become insurmountable. Her first big promotion had coincided with Daniel's publisher accepting his novel. They'd celebrated both achievements with champagne and promises of balancing their growing careers with their relationship. But balance, Olivia had learned, was easier to toast to than to achieve. She flipped forward several pages. Their housewarming party at the sleek condo they'd purchased in Pacific Heights, a significant upgrade, financed primarily by her salary. Daniel standing awkwardly beside her father, a federal judge who had never quite warmed to his literary son-in-law. Olivia receiving an award at a legal gala, Daniel barely visible at the edge of the frame. The timeline of their dissolution was right there in the photographs. The increasing physical space between them in each picture, her growing confidence, his retreating posture. The album documented not just their history, but their gradual estrangement. The final photo was from a Christmas party at her law firm, 3 months before their separation. Olivia stood in a group of colleagues, animated, engaged, while Daniel lingered at the periphery, nursing a drink, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. She hadn't noticed it then, how apart he already was, how he had already begun to leave her in every way except physically. A week after that party, she'd been offered the position at Nexus Innovations, the opportunity of a lifetime. Chief Legal Officer at a major tech firm, reporting directly to the CEO with equity options that could set her up for life. She'd taken the job without hesitation. "We never even discussed it, did we?" Olivia said aloud to the empty apartment. To the ghost of her former marriage, she had simply announced her decision over dinner, already mentally decorating her new office, planning her first initiatives. Daniel had congratulated her, opened a bottle of wine, asked all the right questions. But something had shifted that night, a tectonic movement beneath the surface of their marriage. 2 months later, he had asked for a separation. "I feel invisible," he'd told her, sitting on the edge of their bed, his voice quiet but resolute. "I'm proud of your success, Olivia, but there's no room for me in your life anymore." She'd been blindsided, hurt, then furious. She'd accused him of being threatened by her achievements, of wanting a wife who would prioritize his career over her own. The argument had spiraled, excavating every buried resentment, every unspoken disappointment. "Maybe you're right," he'd finally said, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Maybe I'm not evolved enough to be married to someone like you. But I know I can't keep living like this, like an afterthought in my own marriage." The divorce had been quick, almost clinical. They'd divided their assets with minimal conflict, both too exhausted to fight over material things. She kept the condo, he took a generous cash settlement. They'd agreed to no alimony, his pride wouldn't allow it, and her anger made her relieved not to have that lingering connection. 6 months later, she'd heard through mutual friends that Daniel was dating his editor at Thornton Media. The news had stung, not because she still wanted him, but because of how quickly he'd found someone to replace her. Someone who, by all accounts, was her opposite in every way, warm, supportive, content to build her life around his. Olivia closed the album and returned it to the shelf. She'd spent the first year after her divorce convinced that Daniel had left because he couldn't handle her success. Now, with the perspective of time and her relationship with Julian, she wondered if there might have been more to it. Julian was as ambitious as she was, perhaps more so. But he made space for her in his life, insisted on it even when they were both drowning in work. He asked about her day and actually listened to the answer. He challenged her intellectually without competing with her. Most importantly, he saw her success not as a threat to his ego, but as a complement to his own achievements. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows. Olivia picked up her phone and, after a moment's hesitation, pulled up her message thread with Daniel. Their last exchange had been 6 months ago, a brief, practical communication about the final transfer of some retirement accounts. She typed quickly before she could change her mind. "Congratulations on your engagement. I hope she makes you happy." She hit send, then set the phone down, surprised by the lack of bitterness she felt. The Daniel chapter of her life was closed, catalogued in an album she would probably eventually discard. What remained was not regret, but recognition of the lessons learned, of the growth that had led her here, to this moment, to Julian. Her phone buzzed with a response from Daniel. "Thank you. Congratulations to you as well. He seems like a good match for you. Simple, cordial, final." Olivia smiled faintly and poured herself another glass of wine. The past was settled. Now she could focus entirely on her future, on planning a wedding, on her expanding role at Nexus, on building a life with a man who didn't ask her to dim her light, but instead helped it shine brighter. Outside, the rain began to ease, droplets, clinging to the window like memories, present but no longer falling, no longer changing the landscape of her life. What Olivia didn't know, couldn't know, was that at the exact moment she was putting away her old wedding album, Camille Thornton was packing a suitcase in the Marina District, slipping off an heirloom, diamond ring, and walking away from the man who had once walked away from Olivia. The ripple effect of Julian's public proposal was still spreading outward, changing lives in ways none of them had anticipated. And somewhere across the city, in a rideshare heading toward Oakland, Camille was staring at her phone, at an article about Olivia Winters and Julian Reynolds, wondering if the woman she had replaced might inadvertently have set her free. Unexpected alliances. The Battery, San Francisco's exclusive members-only club, hummed with the quiet energy of power and privilege. In a secluded corner of the third-floor library, Olivia sat reviewing contracts on her laptop, occasionally sipping an espresso. The club served as her sanctuary when she needed to escape both her office at Nexus and her apartment, which had become command central for wedding planning. 3 weeks had passed since Julian's proposal, and their lives had accelerated to warp speed. The wedding was set for spring, just 6 months away, at Julian's insistence. "When you know," he'd said with characteristic decisiveness. Olivia had agreed, surprised by her own lack of hesitation. "Ms. Winters?" Olivia looked up to find one of the club's staff standing beside her table. "There's someone asking to see you at reception, a Ms. Thornton. She doesn't have membership, but she said it's important." Olivia's fingers froze over her keyboard. Camille Thornton, Daniel's fiancée? Or was she? The society columns had been oddly silent about that particular engagement since Olivia's own had made headlines. Curiosity overcame caution. "I'll come down." In the marble-floored reception area, Camille stood examining a contemporary painting. Her posture tense despite her casual attire, dark jeans, an oversized cream sweater, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger than Olivia remembered from the gala, more vulnerable without the armor of evening wear and professional makeup. "Camille," Olivia said, approaching with professional courtesy. "This is unexpected." Camille turned, her expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "I'm sorry to interrupt your day. I tried to reach you at Nexus, but your assistant said you were working remotely." "What can I do for you?" Olivia kept her tone neutral, acutely aware of the reception staff pretending not to listen. "Could we talk somewhere private?" "I promise. I won't take much of your time." 15 minutes later, they sat in the Battery's garden terrace, relatively secluded behind a screen of potted bamboo. A server had brought them tea, which neither woman had touched. Daniel and I broke up, Camille said without preamble, her fingers twisting the strap of her handbag. The night of your engagement. Olivia blinked, taken aback by the directness. I'm sorry to hear that, she said, surprised to find she meant it. But I'm not sure why you're telling me. Because it was because of you. Camille looked up, meeting Olivia's eyes directly. Or rather, because of what I saw that night. You and Julian Reynolds, the way he looked at you when he proposed. Olivia felt a flicker of defensiveness. If you're suggesting I orchestrated that engagement to somehow affect you or Daniel, no, Camille interrupted, shaking her head. God, no. That's not it at all. I don't think you even noticed us in the crowd. This isn't about blame. It's about... She paused, searching for the right words. Clarity. Seeing something that makes you question everything you thought you wanted. The defensiveness faded, replaced by a reluctant understanding. Go on. Camille took a deep breath. I've spent 3 years defining myself in opposition to you. The anti-Olivia. The woman who wouldn't put career before relationship. Who would give Daniel what he said he needed? Support, attention, priority. A bitter smile twisted her lips. Do you know what I realized that night? That I've been playing a role in someone else's story instead of writing my own. The words hit Olivia with unexpected force. How many times had she accused Daniel of exactly that, of wanting her to be a supporting character rather than the protagonist of her own life? What does this have to do with me? Olivia asked, gentler now. I've been offered a position at Vanguard Publishing in New York, Camille said. Senior editor, complete creative control over a new imprint focusing on diverse voices in fiction. It's my dream job. I'd be a fool not to take it. Congratulations, Olivia said, still puzzled. But again, why are you telling me this? Camille looked down at her untouched tea. Because the offer came from Thornton Media's biggest competitor. Because taking it means burning bridges with Daniel's family. Because I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. She looked up, vulnerability naked in her expression. And because you're the only person who might understand what it's like to choose yourself over a relationship with Daniel Winters. Olivia sat back, genuinely stunned. Of all the scenarios she might have imagined for this meeting, seeking her, advice had never crossed her mind. I didn't choose career over Daniel, she said finally, carefully. That's what he believes, what he probably told you, but it wasn't that simple. I chose a life where my ambitions mattered as much as his, where I didn't have to apologize for my success or dim my light to protect his ego. She paused, surprised by her own candor. The problem wasn't that I loved my career too much. It was that he needed to be the center of my universe and I couldn't give him that. And Julian doesn't need that? Camille asked, a genuine question rather than a challenge. Julian has his own universe, Olivia said with a small smile. He doesn't need to be the center of mine. We orbit each other. Two complete systems in alignment. Camille nodded slowly, absorbing this. That night at the gala, watching Julian propose to you, it was like seeing an alternative future, one where ambition and partnership aren't mutually exclusive. They shouldn't be, Olivia agreed. Daniel's not a bad person, Camille said, almost defensively. He's kind, thoughtful. I know, Olivia interrupted gently. I didn't marry him because he was terrible. I divorced him because we wanted different things from life, from partnership. There's no villain in that story, just incompatibility. They sat in silence for a moment. The ambient sounds of the terrace, quiet conversations, the distant clink of glasses, filling the space between them. Take the job, Olivia said finally. Not because it's what I would do, but because you already know it's what you want to do. You wouldn't be here otherwise. Camille looked surprised, then relieved. I've already accepted it, actually. I start in 3 weeks, She hesitated. I needed to hear from someone who's been where I am that I'm not making a mistake. I can't tell you that, Olivia said honestly. I don't know what the right path is for you, but I do know that the greatest mistake is living someone else's idea of your life. Camille smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. That should be on a motivational poster. Olivia laughed, surprising herself. God, please don't quote me. I have a reputation for ruthless pragmatism to maintain. Your secret's safe with me, Camille promised, her expression sobering. Thank you for seeing me. I know this must be awkward. Life is awkward, Olivia replied with a shrug. Might as well embrace it. As they stood to leave, Camille hesitated. There's one more thing. Daniel doesn't know I'm here. He doesn't know about the job offer either. I'm telling him tonight. That's between you and him, Olivia said carefully. We're not friends, Camille. This conversation doesn't make us confidants. I know, but I thought you should know that he regrets how things ended between you. Not the divorce itself, but the way he handled it. He thinks you hate him. Olivia considered this. I don't hate Daniel. I've moved beyond that. We weren't right for each other, but that doesn't mean I wish him unhappiness. Would you tell him that? Camille asked. Not for me, but for him. For closure. Olivia raised an eyebrow. You're asking me to give closure to the man you're leaving? Ironic, isn't it? Camille smiled sadly. But yes, we're all tangled up in this strange ripple effect. Maybe it's time to smooth the waters. Against her better judgment, Olivia found herself nodding. I'll think about it. They walked together to the Battery's entrance, an unlikely pair connected by the invisible thread of shared experience. Good luck in New York, Olivia said as they reached the door. Good luck with your wedding, Camille replied. For what it's worth, Julian Reynolds looks at you the way every woman deserves to be looked at. Like you're not just the best part of his day, but an essential part of his vision for the future. As Camille walked away down the street, Olivia stood watching her go, struck by the strange turns life could take. 3 years ago, she had lost a husband. Today, she had gained not a friend, exactly, but an unexpected ally in the complex business of being a woman determined to have it all. She pulled out her phone and texted Julian. Dinner tonight? I have a strange story to tell you. His reply came almost instantly. Can't wait to hear it. Your strange stories are my favorite kind. Olivia smiled, slipping her phone back into her pocket. As she turned to re-enter the Battery, she caught sight of her reflection in the glass door, confident, poised, complete unto herself. The woman she had always been meant to be, now moving toward a future bright with possibility. And somewhere, across the city, Camille Thornton was preparing to do the same. New Beginnings' golden hour bathed the headlands in warm light as Julian stood at the edge of the cliffside clearing, hands in the pockets of his tailored pants, looking out over the Pacific. The private property, 20 acres of pristine northern California coastline, had been in his family for generations, but he'd only recently begun to appreciate its quiet majesty. It's perfect, Olivia said, slipping her arm through his as she joined him at the cliff's edge. Absolutely perfect. 6 months had passed since his impromptu proposal at the gala. Tomorrow they would be married on this very spot, surrounded by only their closest friends and family, a deliberately intimate gathering for 2 people whose lives were otherwise lived in the public eye. I used to come here as a kid, Julian said, his voice soft with nostalgia. My grandfather would tell me that someday, when I found the right person, this would be the place to start forever. Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder. Wise man? He would have loved you, Julian said. Brilliant, fearless women were his favorite kind of people. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. The wedding planner and her team were busy behind them, setting up the final preparations for tomorrow's ceremony, arranging chairs, finalizing the placement of the floral arch, testing the sound system. The controlled chaos faded into the background as Olivia and Julian shared this moment of quiet before the whirlwind of their wedding weekend. "Nervous?" Julian asked, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "About marrying you?" "Not at all." Olivia smiled up at him. "About my father's toast? Absolutely terrified." Julian laughed. "Judge Winters has assured me he'll be both brief and benign." "You don't know my father like I do. He's been saving up embarrassing stories about me for 37 years, just waiting for this moment." Their banter was interrupted by the wedding planner, Valerie, approaching with a tablet in hand. "Sorry to disturb you, but we have a last-minute question about the seating chart. There's been a change to the guest list." Julian raised an eyebrow. "A change? This late?" "Someone who RSVP'd no has just called to accept," Valerie explained, her professional calm never wavering. "A Mr. Daniel Winters and guest." Olivia stiffened beside him. "Daniel's coming? With a guest?" "That's what the message said," Valerie confirmed. "I can call back and explain that it's too late." "No," Olivia said quickly, surprising herself. "No, it's fine. Put them at table 7 with my cousins from Seattle. They're good conversationalists." Valerie nodded and retreated, leaving Olivia and Julian alone again with the sunset and this unexpected development. "Are you sure about this?" Julian asked, studying her face. "You don't have to have your ex-husband at our wedding just to be polite." Olivia considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, she had finally taken Camille's advice and reached out to Daniel, meeting him for coffee at a neutral location in Sausalito. The conversation had been awkward at first, then surprisingly honest. They had talked about their marriage, their divorce, the ways they had both contributed to the relationship's demise. There had been apologies on both sides, acknowledgments of hurt caused and lessons learned. It hadn't made them friends exactly, but it had dissolved the last vestiges of bitterness. Daniel had mentioned he was seeing someone new, a professor of comparative literature at Stanford, and seemed genuinely happy for Olivia and Julian. "I'm sure," she said now, squeezing Julian's hand. "The past is past. Tomorrow is about our future." Julian kissed her temple. "Have I mentioned lately that your emotional maturity is incredibly sexy?" "Not in the last few hours," Olivia teased. "You're slipping." They laughed together, the moment of tension dissipating into the golden air. Behind them, Valerie cleared her throat discreetly. "We should go," Julian said. "Separate dinner plans tonight, remember? Tradition and all that." "Ridiculous tradition," Olivia grumbled good-naturedly. "Why can't I see the groom the night before the wedding? We live together." "Because my mother would have a conniption," Julian reminded her. "And because anticipation makes the heart grow fonder." "I think that's absence," Olivia corrected. "Same difference." He kissed her, a lingering promise of tomorrow. "One night apart, then a lifetime together. I think we can manage." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the fog that often shrouded the headlands mysteriously absent, as if nature itself approved of the union about to take place. In the guest house on the property, Olivia stood before a full-length mirror as her mother fastened the last pearl button on her dress, an elegant, minimalist design in ivory silk that skimmed her body like water. "You look magnificent," Elizabeth, Winters said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Absolutely magnificent." Olivia smiled at her mother's reflection. "Thank you for being here. For everything. Wild horses couldn't have kept me away." Elizabeth adjusted the simple pearl earrings Olivia wore, her grandmother's, serving as both something old and something borrowed. A knock at the door preceded the entrance of Olivia's father, resplendent in his morning suit, his expression a complex mixture of pride and the particular melancholy that accompanies giving away one's only daughter. "It's time," he said simply, offering his arm. The walk from the guest house to the cliffside clearing was short but significant, a physical manifestation of the journey from one phase of life to another. Olivia held her father's arm, listening to the string quartet playing Debussy, feeling the gentle breeze against her face, savoring these last moments of anticipation. As they rounded the final curve in the path, the wedding site came into view. 60 guests stood as the first notes of the processional began. At the end of the aisle, beneath an arch of white roses and olive branches, Julian waited, his expression transforming as he caught sight of her. Olivia's eyes locked with his, and suddenly they were the only two people in the world. She barely registered the faces she passed. Colleagues from Nexus, friends from law school, family members from both sides. Her focus narrowed to Julian, to the future they were about to begin together. Halfway down the aisle, her gaze briefly caught on an unexpected sight. Daniel, standing beside a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair, both smiling genuinely at her. And next to them, in a striking cobalt blue dress, was Camille Thornton, looking radiant and confident. She had returned from New York for the occasion, accompanying her new partner, a distinguished woman Olivia recognized as the CEO of a major publishing house. The sight didn't jar her as it might have once. Instead, it felt like the closing of a circle, the final resolution of a story that had needed an ending before a new one could truly begin. Judge Winters placed Olivia's hand in Julian's, the symbolic gesture carrying the weight of tradition and the promise of future. As they turned to face the officiant, Julian leaned close to whisper in her ear, "You take my breath away." The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows written by themselves, promises not of blind devotion, but of mutual respect, partnership, and a commitment to supporting each other's dreams alongside their shared ones. When they exchanged rings, Olivia's hands were steady, her heart full. "By the power vested in me by the state of California," the officiant concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was met with applause, genuine and joyful. As they turned to face their guests as a married couple, Olivia caught Camille's eye across the gathering. The younger woman raised her champagne glass in a subtle toast, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. Olivia nodded in return, a silent communication between two women who had once been inadvertent adversaries and were now, in their own way, allies. The reception flowed with ease, dinner served under the stars as the sun set over the Pacific. During a brief lull in the festivities, Olivia found herself momentarily alone, watching Julian across the dance floor as he laughed with his college roommates. "Congratulations," a familiar voice said beside her. Daniel, holding 2 glasses of champagne, offered one to her. "Julian seems like an exceptional man." "He is," Olivia agreed, accepting the glass. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot." "Closure looks good on both of us," Daniel said with a small smile. "Rebecca's wonderful, by the way. Nothing like you, nothing like Camille. I think I finally figured out I needed to find someone who complements me rather than someone I was trying to either impress or replace." "Growth," Olivia observed, raising her glass slightly. "It suits you. You too." Daniel glanced toward Julian. "He looks at you the way I should have." "We were young," Olivia said, not unkindly. "We did our best with who we were then. And now, we're doing better." Daniel clinked his glass gently against hers. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings?" she echoed. Across the reception, Camille watched this exchange from her table, her hand intertwined with Evelyn's beneath the tablecloth. 6 months at Vanguard Publishing had transformed her. The successful launch of her imprint, the recognition from industry peers, the unexpected romance with the company's visionary CEO. New York had been a revelation, a place where she could finally write her own story rather than exist as a footnote in someone else's. "Everything all right?" Evelyn asked, following her gaze to where Olivia and Daniel stood talking. "More than all right," Camille assured her, "just appreciating how strangely life works out sometimes, meaning that sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a beginning." Camille smiled, squeezing Evelyn's hand. "If I hadn't seen Olivia's engagement that night, I might never have questioned my own choices, might never have taken the job at Vanguard, might never have met you." "Then I owe Olivia Winters a debt of gratitude," Evelyn said with a warm smile. The orchestra began a new song, and Julian appeared at Olivia's side, claiming her for another dance. As he led her to the floor, Olivia caught sight of her reflection in the glass doors leading to the terrace. Herself in her wedding dress, Julian beside her, their future stretching out before them like the endless Pacific horizon. One moment, one decision, one public proposal had created ripples that changed not just her life, but the lives of those connected to her in ways she could never have predicted. Daniel had found his genuine match in Rebecca. Camille had discovered her own path to success and happiness with Evelyn, and Olivia herself had found in Julian what she had always sought but never quite believed possible, a partnership of equals, a love that amplified rather than diminished. As Julian spun her beneath the stars, Olivia surrendered to the moment, to the joy of new beginnings and the knowledge that some endings were necessary to reach them. The past had delivered them all exactly where they needed to be, not through spite or revenge or competition, but through the natural evolution of lives lived authentically. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new triumphs, new ripples spreading outward from each choice they made. But tonight, on this cliff above the Pacific, surrounded by those who had traveled their various paths to be here, there was only this perfect moment, a culmination and a beginning all at once. "Happy?" Julian asked, his eyes reflecting the Baidiwas, fairy lights strung above them. Olivia smiled up at him, her heart full. "Beyond words." And as they danced beneath the infinite sky, 4 separate journeys, once painfully intertwined, now beautifully resolved, continued forward into the future, each following its own true course at last.